I fell in love on the planet. The planet is really a piece of art.
For me, the meaning resides in nature.
Wir wollen nicht mehr von blinden Eliten dirigiert werden. Wir wollen unser Leben selbst in die Hand nehmen.
There has never been a time when a single individual had more power in the history of our planet.
Alles ist miteinander verbunden. Die Tiere mit dem Dschungel, mit den Ozeanen und wir Menschen sind Teil dieses Ökosystems.
Macht endlich etwas gegen die Klimakrise.
I was born with this huge passion for animals and for wildlife, with desire to protect them, and I want to fight back for them.
Und dieser Traum bewegt, glaube ich, immer mehr Menschen auf dieser Welt.
By taking peaceful action, you make change.
Follow your heart, break the rules,
and make history.
So law has created this problem, and law can amend it.
When you live in exceptional times, you need people who break rules.
GDP being about stealing from the future. It's stealing from the present.
I don't think the planet stands a chance if we allow that corruption to proceed.
Die Erde heizt sich auf, wir sterben bald aus. Was machen wir jetzt?
What we need is living economies.
I can no longer afford to just sit and wait for someone else to step up.
Wenn die 900 Menschen hier nur 5 weitere inspirieren, 4.500 Menschen, die morgen vielleicht schon eine Veränderung erwirken.
Um wirklich was zu bewegen, muss man manchmal wirklich auf den Tisch hauen. Deswegen ist das da auch so eine lässige Veranstaltung, weil das sind sehr viele Leute, die echt auf den Tisch hauen.
Wenn es sowas gäbe wie einen Idealismus-Nobelpreis, Greenpeace würde euch dafür nominieren.
For me, this is all about education. What we give our children is so important. Any experience we can give them to be outdoors, to be barefoot, to touch the soil, to understand their place in the environment will stay with them, I can guarantee.
You don't have to be black, you don't have to be Austrian, you don't have to be German, you don't have to be anything. All you have to be is a human being that shows up.
I think this is amazing. It gives me hope.
Neon Green Network begrüßt Sie zu den Erdgesprächen.
Welcome to the Earth Talks 2022.
Liebe Damen und Herren, herzlich willkommen.
Ladies and gentlemen, a cordial welcome.
Schön, dass Sie alle da sind zu den
13.
Erdgesprächen, wo einem vielleicht der Aberglaube packen könnte. Die 13. Ausgabe, für Mitte Oktober 2020 geplant
Actually, they would have been scheduled for October of 2020, and there's no need to tell you that this was a very inopportune moment now, 1.5 years later. We are finally here, and to put it in the words of our President, what a 40 inauguration speeches of new government members. Well, we are glad to have our President here with his wife, Doris Schmid, our Leonore Gewessler, our Minister for Climate Protection, also the management of Vier Pfoten, Greenpeace, Global 2000 and World Wildlife Fund for Nature, and our keynote speakers, the historian Philipp Blom. Welcome.
Bei uns ist auch Biobauer Thomas Weitz.
We also have Thomas Weitz, an organic farmer.
Und wir haben bis zuletzt gebangt, ob das mit der Reise nach
Österreich. Until the very last, we hoped that you would be able to travel to Austria. Now you can see it has worked. So welcome to the indigenous activist Chuma Shipaya.
Für alle, die schon öfter bei
For all those who have participated in the Earth Talks, let me warn you, some things are different this time. Until very recently, I would have thought I would be sitting out there in the audience and listening when my colleague Manuela Reidel from Puls 4 would be welcoming you as a moderator, but over the past 2 years, we've learned that sometimes things turn out to be different. And there's a lot of things that are still the same. also here, and that's the presence of the federal president. And of course, we are not going to anticipate anything he might say, but for all the nerds who are speculating about his personal career, he might be announcing today that, as in previous years, he might also want to come back as the acting federal president of Austria next year.
Hier ist das Staatsoberhaupt.
This is our head of state, Alexander van der Bellen. Neon Green Network welcomes Federal President Alexander van der Bellen.
Nice try. Sehr geehrte Frau Bundesministerin Gewessler.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear Minister Gewessler, dear NG Rattay, dear activists.
Meine Damen und Herren, willkommen.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Earth Talks. Welcome to this year's Earth Talks.
Aber vorweg möchte ich eine kurze Bemerkung machen.
Let me make a comment before I start my presentation. You can imagine why. Because, well, we have gathered here as free people in order to speak about ways and means to save the very foundation of our lives and to talk about how to do this. Just a few hundred kilometers away from here, people are fighting for sheer survival. This Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, it may sound trite, but we have to condemn it severely. And once again, I'm calling upon the aggressor to end the war that he has started. Even more so, since we are faced with a challenge, namely the challenge of the climate crisis that we can only overcome and master together. When there's a war, there's separation. But in the 21st century, that is to say, now, we need exactly the opposite. We need cooperation at the national and international level in order to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases and in order to protect ourselves against an uncontrollable and irreversible climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, you all know that. We have heard this in one or the other form. I am preaching to the converted, and this is not really one of my major passions. So I assume that all of us, we're trying every day to start small, start with ourselves, and do whatever we can do in our own area of responsibility. And sometimes it is difficult, I'm saying as it is, not to give in to fatalism, not to say, it's already too late anyway. No, in spite of all these crises, in spite of all the wars, in spite of the pandemic, our common goal still is and remains to protect and preserve our foundations of our livelihoods. Sometimes people are saying it's about saving planet Earth. I don't think so. Planet Earth doesn't care whether we save it or not. Earth doesn't need us. We need planet Earth. It's about saving ourselves, or to be more precise, to preserve a planet worth living for future generations. This is why we need to manage a transformation of our way of living. We need to transform our way of seeing the world. And what's part of this transformation is to understand on a broad basis that whatever we do, whatever we endeavor, we condition each other, we depend on each other, we're interrelated, and whatever we do or omit or refrain from doing makes a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, I've had the opportunity, the pleasure and the privilege to talk to Juma Chipaya before the conference. And for those of you who don't know her yet, Juma is the leader of the Jumaya people, the Juma Chipaya people in the Brazilian Amazon, and she's the first female chief of this indigenous tribe.
In the Hofburg haben wir ein Foto gemacht.
In the Hofburg, in the Imperial Palace, we took a picture with Juma Chipaya underneath the picture of Maria Theresia. I think you all know this room from previous events. I explained to Juma that this is our empress. That's at least how we called her. And for 40 years, she ruled Austria. But that was in the 18th century. So she was the first and the last empress of that kind, if you do not consider the transitional chancellor that we had. Anyway, I'm not going to use this term. In June of 2019, we had a female chancellor, you know what I mean, Ms. Brigitte Bierlein. So, not considering her, that's the Maria Theresia was the last one. So, Juma is not only talking about this, she also does something about it. And when the Bellomonte hydroelectric power plant dam was to be built, she uncovered a scandal and she received numerous death threats, and she was the victim of attacks, and she had to flee with her daughter. And now, during the last Easter weekend, the situation escalated yet again, this time in connection with gold mining in the region and illegal gold diggers. Juma's village was attacked and her parents were threatened. And for some time it wasn't clear how things would go forward, whether her parents were still alive and whether she herself could travel to Europe. And I'm very pleased that in the final analysis it did work out. Juma Chipaya stands up for the autonomy of indigenous communities, for equality between men and women, the protection of the rainforest. We know how important the rainforest is for global climate, and the fight against corruption. And if we listen to her, and all of us are going to have the opportunity to do so today, it becomes clear how these things are interconnected and how they condition each other. And I told you previously that sometimes it is difficult not to fall for fatalism. It is ideas such as those put forward by Juma Chipaya, Greta Thunberg and many others that give us hope. That give us hope that we'll find a good way forward in order to preserve what's so important to us. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings me to the most important statement at the end, namely, I declare the Earth Talks opened, and I'd like to express the wish that these words will be followed by deeds. Thank you.
We'll try again, Herr Bundespräsident.
We'll try again. Let us start with the keynotes, and let me start with a voice that you may be familiar with from the radio station or from a face that you know from TV.
Philipp Blom is
a philosopher and historian. He studied in Vienna and Oxford. He's a writer, and he moderates Punkt 1 on Ö1, a cultural TV station. He has a documentary, Der taumelnde Kontinent, and he works as a curator. Philipp Blom's books combine historical research and philosophical studies. Some turned into bestsellers, were translated into 16 languages, and were distinguished numerous awards. In light of global warming and digitization, he is turning to problems of the present and the future. And his recent book, Was auf dem Spiel steht, What's at Stake, is an illustration of that. This crazy idea that we can be the boss of nature. Well, it has been with us for 3,000 years, and now it looks like a suicidal idea. Neon Green Network presents Philipp Blom. Good evening.
Guten Abend, jetzt sehe ich Sie gerade nicht so gut, aber ich
I
habe Sie vorher
can't see
gesehen.
you, but I saw you before. Lots of open faces, people who have come here
Damit wir vielleicht gemeinsam irgendetwas ändern
in order
können.
to
Und das
help change things together. And that gives me courage.
Mut ist etwas,
And courage
wir im Moment
is
vielleicht
something
manchmal nicht
that
genug
sometimes we
haben.
don't have enough of at the present moment because we are in a state of war.
Wir sind nicht nur, es gibt nicht nur den Krieg,
There's
den
not only the war that your president referred to, the war
nur ein Land, von dem uns nur ein Land
that
trennt hier.
affects a country that is
Wir sind
only
in einem viel größeren Krieg in dieser Ukraine.
two more countries further on.
Übrigens ein Teil,
Ukraine is
der nicht
part of
passieren würde ohne fossile
the whole story, and this wouldn't happen without any fossil fuels in the equation, because the fossil fuel wars
zeigen uns auch,
that are covering our planet also show to us what kind of a tragedy the use of fossil fuels can be for democracies and for the shaping of human lives and existences. But that's not the war that I'm going to refer to today. The war I'm talking about is the war that we are waging against nature.
wir zerstören die Natur,
We are destroying nature
leben zu können.
in order to be able to have this lifestyle in this very luxurious environment.
Wir tun das mit einem Tempo, das man nur
And we are doing so at a speed that can only be considered to be breathtaking and mad. And you're going to hear from Juma, who will tell you, well, I've researched this figure repeatedly, and it seems to be incredible. Currently, humanity is destroying 30 football fields worth of rainforest every minute. So I've been talking for 2 minutes, so that's 60 football fields worth of rainforest that's been destroyed. And that is a rate that is mad. And that's a rate that cannot go on like that. But that also leads us to the question, how is that possible?
dass eine
How is it possible for a primate species
beispiellose Kampagne beginnt,
to wage this unparalleled campaign of destroying its very foundation of its existence,
Überleben zu zerstören?
to destroy the very basis of our livelihood?
Ich bin Historiker, ich möchte
I'm a historian, so let me take you back to history, a long time travel, in order to explain,
die einzige Tierart,
because we are not the only species that is destroying its habitat.
tun das oft.
Animals that don't have any natural enemies do this a lot. Rabbits in Australia, or also deer in our forests that need to be artificially controlled. Otherwise, they will eat up their own resources. We don't have any natural enemies either that would eat us, but we have other things that have accelerated this process. We have technologies and we have stories, narratives. And these narratives, they create us and they give us the ideas that shape the outlook on our lives. And there is one story that is really important, and you may be familiar with it from the Bible, this famous sentence that God is saying,
zu verstehen, wie wichtig
make this planet your own.
mitnehmen in
And
die Welt, die herum war diese biblische Welt, die Welt der Griechen, die Welt
subdue the earth, subjugate the earth. This was important for the world of the Romans and the Egyptians.
von der Welt, aus der Juma
That wasn't so different than the world that Juma comes from. This is a world that is without any dead matter. This is a world where embedded in a system of interests and intentions
jedem Schritt, den wir machen, auf das Territorium von jemand anders treten.
where we step on other people's territory. So this is why we need to, well,
Göttern, den Dämonen, den Nymphen. Man muss Opfer bringen.
we need to sacrifice to the gods, we need to pray to them, we need to show respect, because
Mich verhalte, als wäre
I know
ich da.
that if we're to behave as if we weren't there, they will soon show you that they are there after all, and well, my endeavor will not be successful. So this world was a constant process of give and take. And now you may understand how important this sentence of the Bible of Genesis is, to subdue the earth. No, the earth does not have any soul.
Die Erde ist nicht beseelt, die Erde ist totes
Planet Earth is dead territory. It doesn't have a soul. You can do with it whatever you like. It won't talk to you. It doesn't want anything from you. It doesn't have a voice. I'm fine, thanks. Okay.
Sie hat keine Stimme.
So Earth doesn't have a voice, so you can do with it whatever you like. In a classical patriarchal way, you can own it, you can penetrate it, you can plow it, you can sell it. You are the Lord.
Und dieses Bild schafft auch die Idee,
And
dass
this
Adam und Eva am
creates the
letzten
idea
Schöpfungstag geschaffen sind. Sie sind etwas
that Adam and Eve, that were created on the last day of creation, they are something other than nature. They are above, they are outside of nature. And they have subjugated this nature, and they can do with it whatever they like.
Aus dieser Idee ist dann im Laufe der Geschichte
And this idea gave birth to the idea of scientifically controlling nature. This idea has fueled the developments that did not only lead to wars and colonialism and environmental destruction, but that also created science, the arts, and cities. So it is like any historical phenomenon, it's always ambivalent. The problem is that this idea that in the Bronze Age was still a harmless illusion, because these societies didn't have the technologies that would allow them to really damage planet Earth. But this idea of subduing the Earth now turns into a lethal trap for us, because our technological reach is so far-reaching that we can really do serious damage. 3,000 years ago, people weren't any stupider than we are. They thought in different categories. Unfortunately, this means that we haven't become any cleverer since then.
Und hier kommen wir an eine Situation,
And
in
this
der wir
takes us to a situation that we're now in, where nature shows to us that we are not the masters of the universe, that we're not in control. We don't control our own fate, and we don't control nature and its systems.
Und wir kommen an einen Moment, wo wir keine
This
Antworten
takes us to a point where we are running out of answers, because the answer that we had to pretty much everything was economic growth, especially in the post-war era. And let me give a simple example. If the economy grows by 3%, then it doubles every 24 years. So every 24 years, we consume twice as many resources, we produce twice as much waste, and twice as many products. I think it's easy to understand that this is not the answer to these crises. What this also means is that if we are no longer the master, and if our weapons and our tools are taken away from us, who or what are we?
Der französische Philosoph
The French philosopher Bruno Latour did a thought experiment that I like very much. He asks, where are we living? The answer is on planet Earth. And then he goes on to say that is a picture that is not helpful, because if you imagine that you live on planet Earth and you have your feet in the soil, on the dirt, and your head up in the air, and you have a wide horizon, and that's a perspective of domination. And he suggests that we need to learn how to rethink ourselves as inhabitants of the critical zone. And this critical zone is this thin membrane of gases that surrounds our planet, between the dead rock beneath our feet and the eternal emptiness above our heads. And it is only within this thin membrane that we can live. And this membrane is held in a very unstable balance and equilibrium by a large number of actors, us, microbes, fungi, tectonic plates, winds, jet streams, all the phenomena on this planet make sure that this critical zone is either livable or not. I like this image because it conveys to us a different outlook and perspective on ourselves. And thus, I believe, this gives us back some leeway for action. Because, of course, we need to take physical action against fossil fuels, against many other harmful practices, and we need to create other ways of doing things. But I think we can only do that if we learn to think about ourselves differently, not as the masters of creation, and I'm talking about masters because we're talking about a patriarchal story here, but we are just one organism among many on this planet. And our future seems to consist in the fact that we need to learn to find our place among those many different organisms, and only if we can find this zone, this habitat, only if we can understand how unimportant we really are, maybe then we stand a chance. We are much less important than plankton or fungi or bacteria, and maybe we're just a carrier system for bacteria and other microbes. But we are important for ourselves. And this is why, if we're no longer boss, if we're no longer the masters, and we're at the end of 3,000 years of cultural history, 3,000 years of cultural history where we learned with our mother's milk that Earth is here for us to subdue it, for us to have unlimited economic growth, and maybe also some snapshots from our holidays. We are now slowly beginning to understand that that's not how it was supposed to be. But when things come to an end, it is also the beginning of something new. I believe this new thing that is created is a revolution that is bigger than the Copernican revolution, who for the first time demonstrated that the sun is not revolving around planet Earth, that we are not the center of the universe. If we could understand that, we might maybe start to create something like a climate of peace. A climate of peace, not only together with the rest of nature, but actually we should take this one step further. We need to abolish nature. That doesn't mean that we need to cut down all the trees, but it means that we need to understand there is not this opposition between us and nature. We are nature. We are a relatively unimportant part of nature. If we can interiorize that idea, if we can radically rethink ourselves as being part of nature, then maybe we'll stand a chance, and then maybe our societies would change. Everything would change, because if this logic of dominance is left behind, what we need to do to ensure our survival, then social practices will change, our self-image will change, the image of man will change. We're living in a state of war against nature. Let us end this war by ending this opposition between us and the rest of the world, by understanding that it is only in peaceful coexistence with nature that we can live and survive. And that requires that we need to be at peace with ourselves. If we can manage to create new images in our minds, then there is new hope. Then there's not just the answers of previous centuries to the crises of the future, but then we can create the answers of tomorrow in order to address these crises and to create an environment that is worth living in. Because we're living with this strange illusion that everything is as good as can be, but I believe that this is an illusion. I believe that our societies could not only be less harmful, they could be better for us. if we were to go down this road, if we had the courage to leave these 3,000 years of cultural history and to enter a new unknown world as beings that we don't understand yet. And if we then learn to get to know ourselves, this would be living at peace with nature, and this would be the subject of peace itself. Thank you.
Mr. Blum,
actually at that point we wanted to talk with Mrs. Ulrike, the environmental psychologist who unfortunately, like so many others in Austria, is in bed. And this gives us an opportunity to go into some more depth of one of your sentences. How actually did we come up with one sentence saying, subdue Earth? You are a historian. You should be able to give a reply. This is an answer I very often have been sharing with people. Actually, I've written a book about that recently. The idea is as old as documented culture. In the Gilgamesh epos of the first story we have, Gilgamesh goes out killing the forest spirit and killing the forest in order to turn it into money and some reputation. He takes some animated, soulful forest, turning it into an economic resource. This logic actually is quite weird. It's some exceptional logic. The anthropologist Philippe Descola says this is what we do not share with cultures in the least. All cultures somehow see themselves as part of a cycle they are not to leave. Being part of an enormous system they are adhering to and they condition, as Mr. van der Bellen said, and that conditions them the other way round. Why? Well, it's interesting. It's not a European but a Western Asian idea, indeed, coming from Mesopotamia. But in the Bible, it was codified as a time capsule sent over to Europe. And it did embark on a great career, giving us an opportunity to encapsulate ourselves from nature, being able to more efficiently exploit it. And what followed is 400 years of enormous development, but every development is ambivalent, and we've reached the very end of this development. You're not a future researcher, but are you optimistically saying that many of people did understand that? I'm a historian, erring a bit from our path, and no one can be optimistic. What's really great is that I'm here and that I can talk with you, but the tragedy is that people coming here are those people who normally do attend similar events like this one, and many people don't attend such events at all, are never listening to things like that, or just reject these ideas. The major challenge is to reach out to them. The major challenge, I'd say, is to somehow find some broad democracy. I'm not a fan of climate dictatorships, and this is going to be the gigantic challenge to tackle. We are doing well. We can't see what's happening in Chuma's world when we do our shopping in the supermarket. We are just those causing the problems. Therefore, it's a clear no. No, we haven't got to grips with the idea yet. We haven't grasped it yet. But we have to try to process these ideas. And I don't care whether people tell me it's too late already. Science gives us models. We don't know how much time there's left. But we know that we have to give our utmost to work as hard as possible, make each and every effort, because in the decades and centuries to come, otherwise we will not be seen in a very favorable light should there be any people left on the earth to see anything in an unfriendly way. Do you have a an answer to the naive question as to how we can convey that message to mankind. I love naive questions, but the problem entailed is it's like questions of children. Hardly ever is there a good reply to it. I really don't know. It's as simple as that, but we have to make each and every effort. And it's important to try to seduce people. People don't learn anything by being told clever arguments. They have to make their own smart experience. It's like the idea of economic growth, solving all of our problems. It's no answer that will lead to useful action, that will lead to good consequences we are trying to attain. We're standing here with empty hands somehow. We will have to find new answers to this question. But this is an incredibly amazing task here in front of us to achieve that target. How to reach out to more people? Well, I think what's going to help us a lot is what's happening already. That is the catastrophes taking place right now. People more and more realize, even in that country, things have changed. We don't know the old structures anymore. Things have changed. Winters are not that cold anymore. There are storms raging in summer. You don't have to go to another continent. We already find them on our continent now. And provided we have these new experiences, people start opening up, being more willing to accept other arguments as well. But we have to set people into motion. We have to reach out to them emotionally. It's great to have information, to have models at our hands and solutions, but until people are willing to embark on these ideas, I think you have to also reach out to them emotionally, seduce them in a way. Maybe today, in the course of the evening, we are going to come up with joint ideas. Mr. Blum, thank you very much for your ideas. Philip Blum, thank you so much. Plastic hour that you are swimming in ocean. It's about your durability, like in the universe and on Earth. Please give us the strength, like we also do. And please make sure to never ever get out of taking things into our hands, because thine is the kingdom of the planet and the power of consumption, the glory of cheap prices in decay time, eternity. Let's be silent. A silent inferno has never seen a story being silent, not doing anything, and the world can keep turning. Only in silence unheard of things will get loud. The boat mother will open up breaches, and her back, the lung, she can hardly bow. No power in her legs anymore. Her children are crying. Her will is molding, and her body is in flame. Powerful, her suffering. She protected her offspring, nurtured her. And we just know that that was not noticed. Now we are dancing on ruins. We organize a concert and avalanches. We all cough old songs of this wonderful world. We are not the victors, not the masters of time. Money, plastic on earth, worlds to ashes, clouds to dust. And the wrong light ticks the wrong clock. Used to always postpone nights. Tomorrow we will bury what we are proud of today. Let's overthrow the monarchy of nature. Let's snatch the crowns from trees. Let's destroy our habitat for man's dream of striving to the top, to the very top. Yet let's clear the ground for our sky made of air. We dig our own tomb. At bottom, we remain a cloud of conceited monks. Actually, we remain monkeys who stingily gawk at each other, who whistle for peace, and instead of peace pipes take up arms. We wage armed wars, manipulating electoral victories for ascent to power, threatening each other with machetes. Because of this or that profit, we are the cancer of the planet, mold, not only on edges and corners, impossible to eradicate stains. The plague, par excellence, Homo sapiens, the ape who thinks and speaks, who uses fire as light, the one who rises, the one who walks upright, who strives for greatness, who floats in space, who lives only for himself, who shapes the end. Homo sapiens, doggedly, cunningly reasonable, but without knowledge, not in the future. He speaks and acts only for himself. We are young, louder than silence, numerous of us and smart, courageous in our hearts, the nature within us, impossible to eradicate, that which covers others cover. We see what others pollute, we clean, what others hide, we bring out, we wake you up, we startle you out of your sleep. The last grains are falling down, and the clock is ticking. It's 12:05. Time is linear. What used to be is turned into what's going to be, and what used to be no longer is. Deaf and blind. This is the last song of mankind we are listening to in the absence of rustling leaves and the lack of insects, chirping forests, and body parts being in waste bins. Whether we are going to survive or not is decided by our last will. Stillness. Just memorize these ideas, because maybe this is going to be our only legacy. Katharina Wente, in times like these, we always like to add, she's half a Russian and half a Ukrainian, because her family, I think, lives on Crimea, and I think here she's also been telling us a story. But let's continue. When putting ideas into drawers, we would have to distinguish between mad farmers or mad citizens or mad politicians we would come up with as well, in order to bring up the fire you will hear more about in his keynote. Thomas Weitz is a passionate organic farmer, and since 2017 he's been a member in the European Parliament. He was raised in a simple world in Vienna, living on a mountainous region at a farm, being in charge of more than 70 bee populations. The activist committed himself to European politics, and since 2019 has been a co-member of the European Green Party. We missed the chance to make sure that agriculture is turned into part of the solution of the climate crisis. The topics range from climate protection to protecting our forests, the animals, and peace policy in the European Union. With all of his power, he wants to commit himself to a socially just, progressive Europe. Neon Green Network is presenting Mr. Thomas Weitz. A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe just a few words at the beginning. How can a child born by a railway worker, the mother coming from the countryside, how was I turned into an organic farmer, political activist, sometime landing in the European Parliament? Just a few words on that some of you may help you recall your own stories. I was a good student, I listened, I had good marks and grades, even though I not always did my homework, which the teachers did not like very much, and I always wanted to see justice. And with 36 students in one class with black pedagogy in the late 60s, at the beginning of the 80s maybe, it was something that brought about some upheaval in my school career, because there was a lot of injustice to point the finger at. And certainly people didn't say I behaved well at school. I learned 2 lessons at school that characterized me for my future life. Some day it was in a history lesson that I learned what we Europeans had to do with European colonialism, and I realized that a major part of our well-being I was allowed to be raised in, when I was educated, was robbed, was taken away from people all across the planet. It was a real shock to me when I learned that, because I thought until then life was good, we were good people. And the next shock that hit me was that suddenly I realized that not only is this history, but it's something actually that's taking place every single day, what we keep doing, what in economic systems we've been practicing all the time. Something not that obvious as it was before, not that brutal maybe, and very often at least as brutal as in former times. And the second shock that characterized my political attitude at some time was being in class during Nazi times. And I would say I was educated with Austrians seeing themselves as the first victim of Nazi Germany. We felt quite well in these narratives, but suddenly we realized this was just not true. Not only were we victims, but we were co-perpetrators. We were at the spearhead, committing many crimes when it came to our neighbors, our brothers and sisters, mankind, nature. And that made me angry. And there was a moment when I could take the decision of either fall into depression or just get active. And it started with demonstrations as students. Then I embarked on anti-globalization marches, the question of peace and war and the Cold War, nuclear weapons being directed at each other. Last weeks were difficult for me, I have to say. I'm pursuing politics in the European Parliament. I felt reminded of these old days, but appearing in the context of peace, being against nuclear power, because nuclear power also has something to do with nuclear weapons, being against the spreading of nuclear weapons, being against poverty and hunger in the world, making a political commitment. Already there, it did lead to some resistance I've met over and again, because when you question the ruling system, you will see resistance building up against you. And there are many people who just don't want to listen to the uncomfortable truth. They are willing to do a lot of things in order not to have to listen to that truth. But at a certain point, I came to the conclusion that I can change things only when I take a proactive step, when I try to change things. So in 1994, we tried to change our work at the farm, organic farming in harmony with nature, with animals, but in a friendly environment, being respectful. And it was striking to see how difficult it is to make money in the field of agriculture. The prices were really plummeting. And I got aware quickly that something is rotten in the system. Something rotten in the system that even diligent farmers can't keep from them, or can make a living only when exploiting the soil, the earth, the forests, our animals. And I came back, my children were a bit older already, and I stood up for political activism, first in Syria against the gall and that horrible smell that makes people sick and the cruel forms of husbandry I found more and more. It really struck me. But to also see that this is a global agricultural industry causing these problems. It's not the farmers, but international big groups that control food systems, that control the production. Incredibly large stables with so many animals in there, on the basis of our land, on the basis of what we keep robbing, taking away from nature, millions of genetically modified agents, glyphosate, for instance, and actually when it comes to extinguishing plants we don't like to see. Deforesting the woods for soy, for coconut oil, for sugar, not only to provide fodder for our animals. I'm coming back to that and putting that into our things. The smell is going to remain, and the liquid manure and the slurry, and where it gets visible is the animal transport. Who would like to look into a mass stable or into some slaughterhouse? But when the system gets visible, we see the cruel, the horrible animal transports we've all witnessed in our European streets. In the European Parliament, we had some committees set up to look into this problem. We looked at loading steps with, without police during the day and night times, and what we got to see very often is taking a strong grip of me. What's happening on the trucks or lorries is still tolerable when compared to what's happening on the ships, and it's happening in Austria as well. We keep saying we don't have mass husbandry here in our country. It looks different here than in other parts of the world or Europe. But our calves also are put onto lorries to be taken to Spain in feedlots of 10, 20,000 animals in one spot in Murcia, where they are being fed with the same products that we get from Amazon area, from Indonesia, taking them all the way to Europe, and when they are fat, we put them onto the ships. This is a black hole of the European legislation. Whenever the animal is brought up onto the ship, very often it's being beaten, then the European law comes to its end. It's illegal, but no one is interested in that. No one has been interested in it. And the ship transports that go to the Middle East, normally 10 to 20% of the animals won't survive that. What about the rest of the animals? I'm not going to share with you in order not to torture you. And to stand up against that system is something we all have to do in concert. We should never, ever try to get out of having to do that. Where does our food come from? How was it produced? And on the basis of what have we produced all of that? Currently, there's a lot of talk about cereals, the safety of foods, and the question is popping up as to how we get our daily bread into our hands. Has it been safeguarded for the future? And I also should say that we are sending out a number of fog grenades here because we have organic fuel that soaks up some 20%. We are worried about whether people in Egypt are going to have something to eat, and 60% of the cereal goes into animal fodder. The question is not whether we are going to have enough cereals, but the question is of whether we are going to provide the cereal for people to eat, or whether we are going to put it into animals in order to eventually export their meat. This is the question we should answer. And how are we going to deal with the question that we do a lot due to deforestation, destroying nature all across the planet? I cooperate a lot with civil societies, let me mention them because it's so important to name them. All of those pulling in concert when it comes to animal protection. It's Animal Welfare Foundation, Animals International, Animals Angels, FDG, Four Paws, and many more. And I would like to explicitly say a big thank you to them for cooperating with them, because it's only together that we can change things. And now I'd like to turn to the woods, to our forests. I'm also working in forestry myself. I have a forest with different trees, different ages, close to nature, my forestry. But when you take a look around in Europe, not only looking at the Amazon River, we used to have remaining parts of the original forest that we also keep deforesting, what we are experiencing in Europe. Let me just give you a couple of examples, because we have very nice woods. We might think everything is okay anyway, but it's not okay. What we see is that in Estonia, for instance, whole areas are deforested for so-called green energy, for biomass. The way they do forestry there, this is no green energy at all. Quite on the contrary, we destroy nature. Trees are not going to get any older than 30 centimeters. We have big machinery to destroy our soil. Monocultures are being deforested again in order to use them. Woods are being dried, even though we know that wet woods are so important for our climate. Coming back to the climate, without our woods and the capacities of our woods to not only produce oxygen, but to also bind CO2 in our soils and in the wood we can then use as timber. Without that capacity, we're not going to get to grips with the climate crisis when it comes to quantities. So it's of crucial importance how we deal with our forests. And in Europe, that always wants to present itself as a climate-friendly continent, the situation is something we don't really want to look into in any detail. I used to go to the Basque Country last month, for instance, and you can see a couple of pictures here showing our own work. Some I did have to steal from others here, but in the Basque Country I went to last weekend, for instance, the hills have just been deforested, nothing's being left, all animals living in water that need clean water, unfortunately, died. Thousands of hectares, ridges of mountains, and that in the middle of the European Union, or in Croatia, where I was a year ago, or you can see the regions here of dried soil here, the drainage canals were here even deepened. I did find one frog only, hardly any nature left, and deforestation wherever you look. BFC and private certification companies that tend to make us believe everything is sustainable and all right. But that's not true. These are private companies that are being paid for by private wood owners, giving them this fig leaf so that they can say their products will be sustainable. So we keep lying to ourselves, or we want to be lied to, and that's something we should really reconsider, whether we definitely want to continue along the same lines or not. When it's about climate, currently we are living in difficult times in the European Parliament as well. There is the Green Deal. We do have some sound environmental policy due to the war raging in Ukraine. Everything's being questioned. I went to the Corinthian government where I was explained that Green Deal is a luxury problem of yesterday. We have new problems. We need new pesticides, new fertilizers. We have to intensify everything. We have to make sure that biodiversity can rule again. Fallow lands have to be recreated. And all of these future-oriented political considerations are being under attack. This is politics necessary for the future in order to survive. However, we know that more and more people start realizing what it is all about. More and more people feel personally that things can't remain unchanged. More and more people are willing to commit themselves, to stand up for their ideas. I'm traveling all around Europe, and when it's about animal transports, it's a good topic indeed, because then empathy can be created, empathy for living creatures. When we take a look at them, when you show them what's happening, and it also works quite well with our forests, people coming from the villages. Please don't get me wrong, it's not our audience here, us who have been gathering here, but farmers from the villages, workers from steel plants who just start realizing we can't continue in the same way. And that's a courageous finding. And the fact that when we cooperate, civil society, politicians, scientists, media people, we can really put things into motion on our planet. When we just look at what the climate movement was able to achieve. I don't know whether you are aware of that. Since 2017, I've been in the European Parliament, and the climate movement was the most powerful political power in the years 2018 and 19. It was not a president or any party, not a majority in the European Parliament, but it was the climate movement out there in the streets that managed to make sure that the climate questions and the necessity of answering the climate question be conveyed into all heads and parts of society. It was the climate movement that succeeded in making sure that every political party, at least in their election programs, had to say a few words on the climate question as well. And it was the climate movement that made sure that we have something like the Green Deal today. And I think we have to repeat that over and again, not getting tired of doing so in order to show what power we have when we organize ourselves, when we go out into the streets, when we show we are many, not giving in, pulling in concert, maybe getting on people's nerves, being willing sometimes also, and that's something I do personally as well, with my immunity status of an MEP, I can render resistance and maybe break the one or the other rule a little bit. It's a necessary step to take for our joint future. And it's necessary that we know that we are able to do that, that we know what the technologies look like, how we can generate energy using wind, water, the sun, and also the heat of our soil. We have the technologies. Mankind is able to solve all of the issues. And we are motivated to take action. And no one should discourage us. Also when looking at dramatic things happening in Ukraine, for instance, we should not be discouraged. But whenever there have been major changes in mankind's history, it was the many, many people together, many joining in with us who brought about the changes. And that's what I would like to close on. We are going to make it. We will succeed. Thank you.
Holen wir gleich da, Herr Weitz, auch noch eine wichtige Partnerin.
Well, let's bring an important partner back, the manager of Vier Pfoten Österreich, Rosenberg, Animal Protection.
Frau Rosenberg, Landwirtschaft, Tierhaltung war in letzter
Rosenberg, animal husbandry and agriculture is very much in the public eye. On the TV station Puls 4, we also discussed it recently. A couple of figures that cannot be repeated often enough because it's so incredible. 77% of the global agricultural surfaces are used for the production for feed for animals. And 75% of the global antibiotics use is only used for animal production, or animal husbandry. Where are we going?
Dankeschön. Ja, es ist wirklich ein System, das völlig außer Kontrolle geht.
Well, this is a system that's completely out of control. And now let me ask another figure. How many animals are we using these resources for? Maybe you have an estimate, because it's an incredible number. 88 billion animals are slaughtered for human consumption. So it's an incredible number. And you see that this is a system that's completely out of bounds. We talked about animal transports. Why are these animal transports happening? Why are we exporting these animals, this livestock? Why are we re-importing them? So all of this is happening in order to circumvent the animal protection standards, in order to make sure that we can produce as much meat as cheaply as possible. And that's this trash mentality that is pervasive, like a golden thread. So exploitation just to have as much cheap meat as possible on our plates. And we're not even seeing what we're doing with this, what we're doing to animals and nature and what we're doing to us people.
Herr Weitz, jetzt haben Sie das schon angesprochen.
Mr. Weitz, have you already talked about that? The things that have been making headlines recently, namely war in Ukraine and security of supply here in Europe.
Was befürchten Sie denn da? Oder fragen
what are
Sie
your
mal
fears?
was
Or
erwarten Sie denn?
let's ask in a more neutral fashion, what are you expecting? I'm not afraid of anything. I think the biggest fear we can have is that we will possibly have to eat less meat and maybe stop using our cars and start using public transport. So that's what we should be afraid of. And that can be our small contribution to supporting people in Ukraine who are defending European values, democracy, human rights, freedom of the media, freedom of opinion. And I believe that we should not complain and say, well, energy has become a bit more expensive. Can't we keep on buying Russian gas? Well, I think that if you take a look at what's happening in Ukraine, well, I think the logical consequence would be a clear decision of people saying, how can I contribute? How can I contribute by changing my lifestyle? There is no problem of security of supply in Europe. Not at all. Where there will be a problem is, well, maybe in Egypt or in Lebanon, where people can't really provide their own food, get people to use wheat in order to eat and not to produce fuel for cars or livestock. And what are we doing with the system of animal husbandry? Antibiotics have been referred to. We are covering these animals, showering them in antibiotics. And of course, if you have 40,000 pigs in a farm, well, of course, they will always be fed antibiotics, and then you breed resistant germs. And these antibiotic-resistant germs are spread all over Europe with this live transport. And then 33,000 people die every year. They die from simple infections. You cut your finger, and then you touch the meat that has those germs, and on 6 out of 10 samples you have resistant and multi-resistant germs. Then you have a simple infection, a purulent wound, where you can die like 200 years ago because no single antibiotic will work, because these germs are resistant against all antibiotics, because all antibiotics can be used for animal husbandry. So we are so cynical, we don't even have 4 or 5 reserve antibiotics that's only available for people. All the questions of zoonosis, well, we don't know 100% where the coronavirus comes from, but it's very likely that it's a cross-infection due to a close proximity of people and live wild animals. And also Ebola, Zika, all of these illnesses are connected to that, these zoonosis. And in the final analysis, we are really shooting ourselves in the foot with the climate, the environment, animal suffering, and also illnesses and epidemics that we're currently seeing. And yes, in which direction do we need to go? I think it is quite clear which direction we should be going in. Let me add, I think it has turned out that the way we are treating animals, how we're exploiting animals, this has really paralyzed the world. There's been a lot of animal suffering, and that has really fueled the pandemic. And it is not only how we treat animals in other parts of the world, but also here in Austria. Mass animal husbandry, it's happening here in Austria. What feed are these livestock eating? It's imported soybeans, and this is why they're burning down the forest in Brazil. So we are not exempt from that. And I think I'd like to emphasize that this is not bad news, that we should eat less meat. I think we need to wake up from this coma of eating too much meat. We've seen an increase of the consumption of meat since the Second World War. It's crazy. This used to be a really valuable product. You saw the animal behind it, and it was also the farmers who were standing behind it, the way of production. Now it's just a trash product, this factory farming. We are well, advertising suggests that it's very idyllic, but in fact, there's a lot of animal suffering of livestock, and we really need to see it, make it visible. But let's bring back optimism, and you also have some good tidings, right? Yes, absolutely. I think the first good news is that during the pandemic, the pubs and restaurants were closed, and now we need to see, well, chicken from Thailand or pork from Poland, is this really the kind of food we want to eat? So there's a lot of rethinking taking place. We are getting a lot of support, and this has led to a situation where the UN have now finally seen that animal protection is a game changer, and it's also central in the fight against climate crisis. There's been a recent resolution. This has been a real milestone. So the UN have now recognized that we also need to protect animals in order to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. And there's something we can do, right? Yes, absolutely. That's what's so good about our nutrition and diet. We eat several times a day. You can be critical. You can ask the restaurant owner where the food comes from, so you can make a difference day after day. And you should check out our website. There's a lot of petitions there. We need you. We need every single voice, every single vote. When we talk to decision makers, we need to bring about those changes in laws. I think we can also show these petitions on your website so that people know what these are about. Thank you very much for being partners of the Earth Talks. Eva Rosenberg.
For
those of you who may not know this, the origin of the Earth Talks has been, well, a meeting place for the people who want to revolutionize. It started in 2008, and since then the Earth Talks have developed further, and they do not only bring role models onto the stage, but they want to be role models themselves by showing how many volunteers are behind such an evening like the Earth Talks, and all the things that are made possible when a lot of volunteers help together. The ones who got the ball rolling, and the one who will join us here is Antje Rattay together with Thomas Lindenthal, an ecologist. Welcome. Angie, I believe that you also have a microphone somewhere. There you are.
Jetzt, soweit wir uns kennen, habe ich dich nicht als besonders geduldigen Menschen.
I think that you're not a very patient person, right? But you had to wait for a year and a half since the last Earth Talks took place. Yes, actually, today should be the 13th of October of 2020. It was back then that due to a picture that I took in the climate march in Paris, I think you'll see it in a minute. For a climate of peace was our slogan. Because we thought that it would be great to interpret this in many different ways. And the reason I like this picture is that I participated in many climate marches in the past, and to me, something that was really touching was the strong commitment shown by indigenous women during those marches. To me, the activists among the indigenous communities are ambassadors of nature, that are showing their colors during these marches, and that are actually the opposite of the people who are discussing during the climate conferences, people who wear suits and ties, who represent the grey cities, to put it in graphic terms. So that was very touching to me, and this is why I wanted to use For a Climate of Peace as a motto for the Earth Talks, and now it is even more fitting due to the circumstances. Unfortunately, it is 1.5 years that lie between the last planned Earth Talks and now. Well, you didn't let this time pass idly, right? No, we tried to make use of the time. And this is a project that we have been pursuing for some time. The instructions of use for planet Earth has been updated. Thomas Lindenthal, a long-standing friend of mine, has declared his readiness to be my scientific co-editor, and in numerous long afternoons during the lockdown, we updated this line after line, and we came up with a new edition. We've taken a couple of pictures that we brought along, and there were several lockdowns, so we also did a children's edition of the instruction leaflet for Planet Earth, together with a colleague of mine who I studied with at the Angewandte. We had found 4 superheroes that would accompany children through those 4 spheres, and well, there was yet another lockdown, and this is when we developed a poster for tiny tots and little children for the elementary schools, where the 4 protagonists accompanies through the spheres. Mr. Lindenthal, you as an accompanying scientist, how do you see these things in light of how we use design and art for communication purpose, but we still need to have a good scientific foundation? Well, the role of the arts and design is often, well, a subdued role. Art is supposed to contribute to the layout for science communication, for posters and movies. And the seduction is what I liked, Mr. Blum. This cognitive, the intuitive, and the sensual dimensions. Well, this is where art plays a big role, and this is increasingly being discussed in science, to integrate art and design, to create an awareness, and in order to also create a sense of being affected by things, and to create this space of reflection through art, and to come up with new solutions through dialogue. So we need to move away from science in the ivory tower. We need to build bridges to society. Do you have a favorite topic? Well, it's hard. This has been a work of art that was started by Angie back then. There was 4 posters about knowledge about the soil, biodiversity, water, and she wanted to bring this together. And I come from the area of sustainability and agronomic sciences. We have talked about diet, nutrition. The President has said it. These things are all interrelated. Gaia, planet Earth, and the global south, and the Amazon, the feedlots. So I believe that what we can do, and that of course is an important part of the instructions of use, is what everybody can contribute. And of course the lifestyle is key here. How we live, our nutrition, what we eat, our mobility, what we can do in terms of mobility, in terms of energy use, what we can do at the level of individual households, and sufficiency, ability to repair products, service life of products. So we're trying to seduce people, make these things sexier, because scientists are always saying, well, it's very complex and complicated and all that, but to give people the courage to say, we want to convey a certain message in a reduced, condensed form, maybe at the risk of leaving out some details, but to convey it better, to raise an awareness. Do you have a subject that is very dear to you? Yes, the biosphere.
Nicht ganz zufällig, dass das Mädchen von der Biosphäre
It is not a coincidence that the girl from Biosphere has blonde hair and has a dog called Mike. She can talk to animals. I'd love to talk to animals. I actually do. They don't always listen, of course, but I talk to animals. But in terms of the biosphere, takes me to resources, and as far as resources are concerned, as a graphic designer, if we do such a project, such as the instruction leaflet for Planet Earth, we print it with the Google printers. They use the cradle-to-cradle gold standard, and these are extremely high printing standards, so there are no better printing standards than those. Cradle-to-cradle, that's a principle that Richard Braunberg developed. I was one of the first speakers here during the first Earth Talks with Frieda Meissner-Blau, and we're really proud that we are doing this. We're using this printer.
Du hast auf jeden Fall auch noch eine Botschaft.
And you also have a message that is really important to you, not only for the people here in the room, but also for the people who are watching us via the live stream. Yes, sure. I have a message to everybody, to myself as well. If I could put forward a wish for this evening, well, let's go home tonight after this event and let us not continue like we did in the past. I believe that every person, every individual has a lot of leeway to leave their comfort zone and to show a lot more respect for all other forms of life on this planet, because I believe that if we continue to live at the expense of planet Earth, this will be very expensive when we get the final bill. Thank you very much, Angie Rattay and Thomas Lindenthal. Hello, I'm Charlotte from France. Welcome. I work for Sortir du Nucléaire, an anti-nuclear initiative. There's hundreds of citizens' initiatives who are trying to get us out of nuclear energy. And actually, in France, there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of that. On our territory, there are 56 reactors that EDF wants to continue to operate. And in Flamanville in Normandy, since 2007, they're building a new reactor, and it should actually already be producing, but due to production errors and delays, now 10 years later, after it was scheduled to go on stream, it's still not producing any nuclear power. And that just goes to show that nuclear power is a waste of time and money when it comes to fighting climate change. So nuclear power is madness. It is neither sustainable nor secure and safe. And Emmanuel Macron has announced that France would soon build 6 new reactors, and they would also extend their service life to 40 years for all the nuclear power plants. And to me, this is simply madness. I'm angry that energy policy is always directed by the lobbies and is not in the hands of citizens. I would like to emphasize that the majority of people in France are not in love with nuclear power. You may have seen this when it comes to taking a decision on the EU taxonomy. The French state and the nuclear lobby fought together to make sure that nuclear power was given an undeserved place in the taxonomy. And this is a huge scandal, this increasing focus on nuclear power. I'm fed up and sick and tired of all this nuclear power discourse concerning uranium. The uranium business comes from neo-colonialism, and thus we also have relations to non-democratic regimes such as Kazakhstan, and that is also subject to Russian influence. So I'm sick and tired of hearing time and again that nuclear power is a solution to save our climate. New reactors are a waste of time and money, like I said. It's too slow, too expensive, and the real solutions to solve the climate crisis are already well known. We need to rethink our consumption of electricity and resources. We need to insulate our buildings. We need to develop renewables. So all of these solutions are already out there. And 100% renewables is possible. And also in the nuclear empire of France, we're seeing how nuclear power can become really dangerous during a war or conflict. So are we going to create further threats by continuing with nuclear power for a few more decades? We don't want that. So this is why I'm so angry to see how France is steering in the wrong direction. This is why we need to resist. We need to resist the inclusion of nuclear power in the taxonomy against the building of new reactors in France. It's not only a French affair, it is a European matter. So please write to the French authorities and also sign our petition against the building of nuclear reactors. And we need your assistance. Au revoir and merci to everybody. As we've heard, nuclear power makes us dependent on problematic imports coming from crisis regions. We have Minister Leonore Gewessler from the Climate Protection Ministry.
Jetzt haben wir dieses Problem im atomkraftfreien Österreich ja nicht. Aber
we don't have this problem of nuclear power here in Austria. We don't have nuclear power, but there's dependency on oil and gas. 80% of our gas comes from Russia. How can we extricate ourselves from that? Well, thank you very much. Thank you also for the wonderful welcome, and thank you for the great input. 80%, that's a figure, well, to quote Philip Lohm, how did we get there? 80% of our gas comes from Russia here in Austria. And if you look back, not the history of the world, but just a few decades, it becomes clear why. Well, policies of the past few decades could not extricate ourselves from this dependency. We have more and more contracts and agreements with Russia that lead to ever more greater dependency. And painful though it may be, and this is a situation that we can't change overnight, of course, but we need to learn from the situation and our mandate. And if you take a look at what's happening in Ukraine, I saw you laughing. This is why I had to look back.
Entschuldigung. Aber die Lehre.
But anyway, this lesson that we need to draw from this situation is to get out of this dependency, not only this dependency from Russia, that's the first and urgent and necessary step. This is where we need to diversify. We need to move away from this dependency on fossil fuels. We need to enter renewables. This was right 10 or 20 years ago, and a lot of people here, they've been saying this for so long. But now, a time has come to do it even faster, to do it in a more resolute and determined way, because every wind turbine that we put up this year is a step in this direction towards independence. Every gas heating system that is replaced by other heating systems is a step in the right direction, and we need to produce here in Austria. We need to produce the energy here in Austria. The question is how to do it.
Wie lange haben wir Zeit?
How much time do we have?
Ich glaube, es gibt drei Dinge, die
I believe that there are three things we need to do. We need to be honest with ourselves. So our short-term solution is to get ourselves out of this ability to be blackmailed by Vladimir Putin. This leads to short-term unpleasant decisions that we need to take. Where can we get raw materials from in the short term? We need to do this at the same time as setting the tracks in the right direction, pursue the use of renewables and electricity. Here in Austria, we're doing some things right. In terms of electricity, we have a high share of renewables, but now we need to have 100% renewables. Our colleague in France has said it. It is possible. We start with electricity. We have a new law that we have just passed. The biggest funding campaign for PV systems has started here. And there are people here in the room who have made sure that this becomes a reality for more than a year. Then there's heating. So wherever possible, we need to exit from gas as quickly as possible. So we need to work on heating with renewables. New law will be passed. We need to save energy, deal with energy in a more efficient way. Energy efficiency has always been a good idea, and now it's especially a good idea. And the most important message is a comprehensive transformation that we are faced with that's unparalleled. So we have never done this before as humanity, but what's good is that we know that we can do it. We know it. It will be a challenge. It won't be easy. It's a huge task that lies ahead of us, but we can do it. But I also know that we need every single one of you for that. Every single person in this room needs to contribute. So the most important thing for this to work is to be active. And this is why I'd like to thank Angie and everybody here in the room, people who are obnoxious, who are getting on people's nerves, who are doing their own thing, and people who think we can postpone climate protection to some later date. No, we need to do it now. And to make sure that everybody listens to this message, we need you and every single one in this country. And this is why I'd like to thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for carrying out the message. Thank you for communicating this to everybody out there. Thank you very much.
Danke, Frau Ministerin.
Thank you.
After politics, we are going to indulge in poetry again, and one who can really combine it well, Katharina Wenti. Hail to you, animals without grace, man slaughters you. Blessed are you by the dozen among supermarket goods, and blessed be the offerings of your antibiotic-ridden bodies, cut up, packaged. Holy factory farming, daughter of industrial society, suffer for us consumers now and in the hour of discarded death. Mother, I can hear you calling, I can see your signs. As an individual, I cannot come up for the fault of all others. Simple repentance instead of words falling like Judas. I'm going to give you away. Tomorrow, the village, the city, the land, the continent will be in flames. We are living in a world out of imagination. When we think the planet would be inexploitable, only man who himself can then take his goods. The eternal fight with creation and himself. The progress of a few only negates the progress of all. Capitalism reigns as idealism, egotism, delegating, all of the isms of the world, blinding our view. We are in the end spurt, at the end of the day. Maybe our mother will bleed due to human birth. Maybe she'll abort us. Maybe she'll educate the stubborn child. Maybe she's going to give in. So let us think of Mother Earth or the idle heritage who let the house go astray before we let her go. not meeting the exit. Let's think of the crazy people who went into the trap, similar to an animal in the stable, trying to run away. Greed. Let us think of the children whose lives we are hindering, those who never ever will be given birth to, those who never ever will be born healthy, those who never ever will live in a healthy world, those who never ever will be healthy again, those who will never ever have been, those who will never ever be, those who never ever will be, those who never ever are allowed to be. Those, yes, those, those who never ever will be thought of. Those, yes, them. Let's think of them. And now tell me how difficult it is to renounce of things, how easy it was to destroy everything. What we are going to say then when they ask us, when they want to know why we had the animal species become extinct with the burning forests, wasting all of the reserves of our earth. Don't tell it to me, just tell it to the children wearing the masks, that it was all worth it. Katarina Venti, thank you so much. You may all have already realized something that in last day has been shown in the media as well recently. We are going to share it with you. Actually, an Instagram video brings it to the very point that we all felt oppressed some 6 days ago.
Estão destruindo as nossas ilhas, estão destruindo o nosso território nesse exato momento. E quando meu pai se aproximou para entender o que estava acontecendo, eles trataram meu pai.
They treated my father with violence. At any moment, an armed conflict can happen on Shibaya land,
A gente não sabe.
and we don't know what else to do.
Lideranças e
Leaders and warriors from other villages are coming to our village to try to persuade the invaders through dialogue to leave our territory. But we don't know yet in which way this encounter will turn out.
a gente está com muito medo.
I am very afraid. Meanwhile, the gold diggers have been arrested. However, the authorities released them again in Brazil. What's very important to mention for us is that her parents at least are safe again now, and they could convince her to come to Austria now. Yesterday, she talked to our federal president. She met Doris Schmidauer and Leonore Gewessler, our minister, and we are really so happy to welcome her here today. A cordial welcome to this amazing lady. Chuma Shipaya is a chieftain of the Chipaya people, a mother. She lives in the Rio Xingu area, one of the major side streams of the Amazon. At the age of 24, she was the first woman ever to become chief of her community. She lived a peaceful life until 2011, the Belo Monte mega dam was started to be built. When it came to the corruption she discovered years later, she was a victim of threats of being killed and attacked. Here it's no longer safe for my children. Certainly I'm worried, but my fear will not stop me. Chuma, together with her daughter, had to flee Brazil. She spent a year in Switzerland, and she was the first representative of the Chipaya who talked in front of the United Nations. Returned to Brazil, she founded the Juma Institute, where she stood up for the autonomy of the indigenous people and gender equality, as well as working against corruption. Neon Green Network is presenting Juma Chipaya.
Wahutu Chipai Kamena. Eu cumprimento a todas e a todos aqui presentes.
This is my way of welcoming all of you.
Primeira dama.
Hello, Mr. President. Welcome, First Lady, Madam Minister. And I would also like to welcome all of you.
Também é autoridade.
You are also an authority as a people. Thank you very much for having taken your time you're going to spend with me here today.
Apesar de ter o coração quase parando nesse momento, não por nervoso.
Though my heart stopped beating almost, not because of me being nervous, but because of the enormous pain I'm feeling. Not only would I like to shed light on the consequences, the effects, but also on hope and dreams. I would also like to mention my dreams and my will to live a good life. Living in a protected region on a much better planet. I've been listening attentively to what's been said before here today, and I learned since I arrived in your country the way how you live here and the way you're showing respect to each other, how safe your lives are. I've seen children walking in the streets, and I've seen the parents following them suit.
Sem preocupação.
No worries,
E tô feliz com
no concerns. That made me happy, and I'm happy about what I've seen, what I've experienced in your country.
É bem diferente da onde eu venho.
That's so different to where I'm from. Not only in my territory, but also in my entire country. I'm from the Chipaya territory, where there are 5 villages in total. Every village has their chief, their leaders. I am the chieftain of one of these villages. It's the Kariman village I'm chief of. And I come from a country where there are other indigenous organizations on the national level representing us,
indígena da Amazônia brasileira, COIAB,
with Yogabe's coordination on the Brazilian level,
do Estado do Pará, FEPIPA,
with the Federation of the Peoples in Pará, the Pipa state,
dos povos indígenas do Brasil,
articulating the people's
e tantas outras
wishes,
organizações.
the Bibi, and many more organizations.
E todas elas sabem que eu estou aqui.
And all know I'm here, standing in front of you today.
Da paz.
I'm here in the name of peace. And I'm asking for peace,
Respeito. E
respect,
direito à vida como qualquer outro cidadão do mundo.
and the right to lead a life like every other global citizen.
É impossível falar somente da dor
It's impossible to only talk about the pain
nos territórios
and
indígenas do Brasil.
the consequences of the indigenous territories in Brazil,
Quando vemos
because we
crianças,
also suffer being children, women, men, animals alike.
sendo
Animals
brutalmente
being killed,
na Ucrânia.
being subjected to a cruel death, people dying
Também
in
sentimos
Ukraine.
a dor dos outros.
We also feel the pain of others.
No momento
It might seem strange or weird in today's world at a time right now, asking people to please be human, to ask for respect, for peace,
amor,
empathy, love.
são princípios básicos.
These are basic principles I'm talking about.
E eu me pergunto, quanto tempo mais
And I'm asking myself, how much more time will the peoples of the forests have to endure? Not only the indigenous people, but also people living along the rivers, farmers, who for centuries
com as suas próprias vidas
have been defending the forest,
para tentar
giving their lives for the forest in order to strike some harmonious balance.
ouvindo a poesia da Catarina,
When we listen to
ter as lágrimas.
Katharina's poetry, it was difficult for me not to start crying, to hide my tears. I'm asking myself each and every day some question, and we should all raise this question. What am I going to tell my children?
Que falhamos
That I've been giving a talk here,
por não garantir
that we failed,
território seguro, por não garantir a
that we
sua
can't
liberdade,
guarantee them a safe territory, that we can't
por não dar segurança.
guarantee they may live a life in liberty, in safety.
E quando ele viu o vídeo,
And
das
watching the video
reportagem que passou nos jornais do Brasil,
and listening to the newspaper articles published in Brazil talking about the invasion in the Shibaya territory, the children see how much we are in despair.
quando eu liguei, ele me perguntou:
When I called my son,
eles destruíram a floresta?
he asked me, have they destroyed the forest? And I replied, don't worry, Tabak. They have not destroyed it. We are not going to let them destroy our forests.
Tá tudo bem.
Don't you worry. Just
Não estava nada bem.
keep playing. It's all
E ele me falou:
okay.
a polícia
But it was
prendeu
not okay.
os garimpeiros.
And he asked whether the police had arrested the gold diggers, And I replied, no, they haven't.
Então eles estão na floresta.
So he said, they will be in the forest.
Vão pegar.
And I again said, no, don't worry, we are going to find them.
Ele só tem 4 anos.
He's only 4 years old.
Não era para ele estar me fazendo esse tipo de pergunta.
Actually, he should not be the one raising these questions. He should not be worried.
Então isso explica muito o motivo de estar aqui hoje
He should
presente.
never have to be fearful. And this explains the motive of my having joined your invitation. It's not because of reputation or being famous, not because of the money or the media.
E sim pela responsabilidade
But it's because of my responsibility.
de defender, de cuidar,
My responsibility to defend, to protect,
para os meus filhos.
to guard everything, not only for my children, but making sure that the generations to come
E possa usufruir de água limpa,
will also be entitled, having the right to enjoy clean water, clean air to breathe,
que ainda tem essa
making sure for them that we still do have our forests,
e a biodiversidade.
making sure to ensure biodiversity of plants and
Pelos povos indígenas.
species and people, not only because of the children or the indigenous peoples, but it's for all of us, for the sake of all of us. I'm asking myself,
Mas é uma pergunta onde todos deveriam se fazer.
and this is a question we should all raise
O que mais precisamos fazer?
in unison, asking, what else should we do? What do we have to do? What else will have to happen in the world? How many peoples will have to be killed?
Terão que chorar?
How many mothers will have to keep crying?
Nenhum país
We don't have any right whatsoever to do that. No country, no
de
government
acabar com o sonho e com o futuro da
is entitled to end my dream, my future, the future of generations to come.
É agora.
The future is
São
now,
as nossas ações.
because it's our
É o que
action,
fazemos.
it's what we are doing,
É o
it's what we are eating, what we buy,
que vai definir, que vai decidir, que vai construir
what we are going to build, what decisions we are going to take, or what we are going to destroy, the future.
Então é agora.
So it's all happening now. The future is about now. It's about what all of us are doing. So it's not my sole responsibility. It's not the indigenous people's responsibility,
Essa luta
the traditional people's responsibility, but it is a fight, a struggle we are all involved in. We will have to fight it together for us.
150% de floresta degradada
150% of the
por garimpo,
deforested
seja
woods
legal
in
ou
Amazon region due to gold digging, legally or illegally pursued, because there are people who would buy gold, people who would finance this action. And in the same way, we see animals being treated that are imprisoned because people buy these products, people eat animals.
grandes indústrias. Esses
And
grandes projetos de desenvolvimento.
These major industries, these big development
Em nome de
programs are intended for whom? On behalf of whom are they being carried
Eu
out?
não sei aqui, mas no Brasil
I don't know about the situation here in your country, but I can say that in Brazil, the major part of beef is being exported to other countries.
Então, esse grande comércio, de fato, não é para pôr a alimentação, não é para matar.
It's the wholesaling business which is not focusing on feeding the hungry.
É para alimentar a fome
In order to
do capitalismo,
feed
a qualquer custo,
capitalism's hunger,
sem se importar com as vidas,
whatever costs may be entailed,
com a dor,
with no respect shown for life, pain, or the future.
e eu quero dizer para vocês,
And what I'd like to share with you
imagine a sua casa.
is the following. Just imagine your house.
Pegar o lixo que você produz,
Let's look at the waste you're producing. Let's say you just keep the waste in your house, not
todos
taking
os
it
anos,
out.
todos os dias, você fizesse a mesma coisa.
Every year, every day, let's say you keep doing it all around the year, leaving the waste in your house. You can easily imagine, I guess, what the final situation will look like. You couldn't survive in this house. You could not raise your children in that house. Just imagine
Planeta.
this house would be our planet. The planet is our big house.
Seja indígena ou não,
And all of us, being indigenous people or not, we all live in one single house.
impressionante como está se tornando planeta.
It's incredible how the planet will develop,
Não me surpreende quando
how much waste we'll see,
ou epidemias
and I'm not going to be surprised by pandemics raging all across the planet. And when we look
são atribuídas
at
à força da natureza.
the impact, we may say this is the power of nature, the animals.
Até quando o ser humano vai continuar
And I'm asking myself, until when is humankind going to hide behind their crimes?
quando vamos colocar a culpa na força da natureza?
Until when are we going to blame nature for what's happening? Until when are we going to blame the animals for everything?
Meu lugar, com certeza estariam dizendo a dor
If they were here instead of me, let's say the pain,
e o medo de morrer que eles
the
têm.
sorrow, and their anxiety of being killed. They have feelings, they have children, like we
Seja peixe,
do. They feel pain, be it a fish,
seja uma borboleta.
a butterfly,
Todos também
or a lion, a tiger. Every one of them will feel pain. We're not the only ones who can feel pain.
não somos os únicos a ter importância
We are not the only ones who are important on that planet, in this big house of ours. However, we have to show respect. We all have to be respectful.
Eu olho a segurança de vocês. Eu olho as ruas.
I can see how safe a life you're living. I saw the clean streets
Não
in your
vejo,
country.
até então não vi pessoas dormindo na rua.
So far, I haven't seen any people sleeping in the streets in
Agora,
horrible
quantos povos
circumstances. But how many
estão à
peoples
beira da miséria?
are at the brink of great misery? How many indigenous people would drink water out of a canal because there is no water left in their rivers? They find their food in waste bins because they can't hunt any food anymore. They experienced all incredible forms of violence because we no longer have the forests. Many indigenous women no longer able to give birth to children because of the mercury, due to the gold diggers' business. Who's responsible for that development?
Existem países, existe população.
Are there countries, are there people
Nessa condição.
who have to live their lives with these circumstances prevailing because the natural resources are exploited, have been exploited for many, many centuries in order to make people in other countries rich, to provide them with every kind of comfort, to bring food onto their tables, to have chocolate eggs embellished with gold particles, to produce toilet paper with gold
Se esquecem.
particles.
Da onde eles estão tirando e a destruição que estão
They keep forgetting where the resources come from, how much they destroy doing so.
Não é fácil.
It's not
E
easy.
nem estou querendo convencer.
I do not want to convince anyone of
Mas é
anything,
preciso ter uma responsabilidade
but we have to shoulder our responsibility.
global.
We have to develop global awareness and a global consciousness.
Não somente repensar.
Not only will we need to rethink our patterns
Que não só
of the
destrói a
consumption market, that not only destroys our forests,
Queremos compromisso.
we want to settle for a compromise. It's all about action, taking action.
Se discute, se fala muito sobre os povos,
Because
sobre a floresta.
there's a lot of discussion about the peoples, about the forest,
Se
climate.
fala prazo como 2030,
Whenever we have a deadline like 2030 set up.
mas quem faz esses prazos?
But who is defining these deadlines? Who is going to agree on such measures? Will they be complied with
Floresta, os rios,
or
os
not?
animais, o clima.
Who will protect our rivers, the climate, the animals?
Então precisamos de menos fala e mais ação.
We should
E
do
para
less talking and
para mudar,
proceed to taking action,
transformar,
taking proactive steps in order to bring about change, to give way to transformation.
ser presidente,
I don't have to be a chief to do that. It doesn't need
ser escritor.
a minister, a president, or an author,
E qualquer uma aqui
but every one
pode transformar.
of us in this world can bring about change. Everyone is empowered to bring about change.
Comprometimento.
However, we just have to take the first step. We have to commit
De
ourselves.
querer
And we have to be determined to take that action
para além dos
in
nossos
order
filhos
to
familiares.
produce healthy lives, not only for our children, for our family members, but for everyone. Everyone has to be guaranteed a life of dignity. I'm entitled to be together with my children.
Para a universidade,
I'm entitled to go back to university,
como qualquer outro.
like everybody else.
E não estou. Nem com os meus filhos,
But I don't have those rights. I can't be with my children. I can't be in my own territory, on my own land, because I'm here.
estou aqui
I'm here.
não numa luta individual,
This is not my individual struggle. This is a collective fight. Not only
mas para todos.
in the interest of my people, it's in the interest of all of us.
E me fizeram uma pergunta hoje cedo.
This morning I was asked a question. What is the forest?
Eu falei, como explicar?
Well, I asked myself, how should I explain this?
Falo todas as palavras.
Because even though I may be using a lot of words to describe it, it is difficult to explain.
Porque antes da explicação,
Because
nós sentimos.
prior to starting with the explanation, we have feelings.
É conexão. É amor.
It is this emotional link. It is love.
Floresta.
It's about understanding that the forest and the biodiversity of the forest is something that is not separate from us.
Mas também entender que somos nós.
We need to develop an understanding that it is
Os rios.
us. We are the forest. We are the rivers. We are the wind. We are the water.
Então, como que eu vou falar? Como que eu vou explicar
So how can I explain?
que é muito mais além que isso?
How can I explain that it is about a lot more than that? How can a mother explain the emotions that
Não tem um manual de instrução.
she has that her child is experiencing danger? I mean, there are no instructions how to feel. We feel that things are going wrong, that things are going amiss, and as far as the forest is concerned, we feel
Nós
how the
somos
forest is
a
doing.
floresta.
Because we are the forest.
Os lagos,
We are the
o
rivers.
oceano,
We are the
o
lakes.
ar.
We are the ocean.
Quanto ser
We are
humano
the
não
air.
entender isso,
And as long as people don't understand that,
procurar buscando soluções ou respostas,
they will continue to try to find
Vazias.
answers. But these will be empty
precisamos
answers.
sentir.
We
Precisamos
need to
entender.
start feeling again. We need to understand
Derrubar uma árvore,
that when we cut down a tree,
nosso mais dia de vida.
we are shortening our lifespan by a day,
Independente de país.
no matter what ethnic group we may be coming from, no matter what country
Nós somos
we may be living in. We are the planet.
Somos o problema.
We are the problem. We are the
Como
problem of this planet.
Mas nós também
We
somos a
as a whole.
solução.
But we are also the solution.
É só preciso levantar.
All we need to do is rise up.
Com determinação.
We need to
Independente
rise
de
up and show a sense of purpose and determination,
independente de impacto.
independent of any threats you may receive, any
Nós
consequences your actions may have. We can bring about this
Então, está além
change,
de
this
repassar
transformation.
essa experiência que aqui estamos vivendo.
But we need to do more. We need to go beyond what we are
E
discussing
sim
here.
sair daqui com um compromisso de fazer a sua parte, que eu sei que muitos já estão fazendo.
when we leave from here, we need to understand that we all need to contribute our fair share, and I know that many of you are already doing that.
Eu não posso ver o rosto de cada de vocês.
I can't see every individual's faces in this room,
Todas as energias.
but I can feel all the energy in this room.
E espero que vocês também sintam a energia da floresta.
And I hope that you can feel the energy of the forest,
E que se
the energy
levante
of the people living there, and that you will rise up, every one of you, every single one of
e
you.
que marchamos juntos.
Rise up and let us march together.
E entender
Let's
que
march
essa
into a
luta
better
é de
world.
todos nós. E para todos nós.
We need to understand that this is our fight for the benefit of all of
Nós
us.
somos a mudança.
We are the change.
Vamos mudar?
Are we going to bring about this change? That's a
Vamos
question.
mudar?
Are we going to bring about this change?
Muito obrigada.
Thank you.
Schumer, bitteschön. Nehmen Sie wieder Platz.
Please take a seat.
Es muss also irgendwie in unserem Instinkt liegen, dass wir die Natur beschützen. Und
So it has to be in our instinct that we protect nature. And one person who protects nature here in Austria is Lena Schilk. Please join us on the stage.
Schumer, ich möchte mit Ihnen noch
Juma,
kurz,
let me start with you.
nachfragen.
I would like to ask you a question.
Dieser Kampf, woher kommt
Why
Ihre Kraft dafür?
do you wage this struggle? Where does your strength come from?
Principalmente da vontade
Well, it is the will
de ver o fim da guerra.
I want to see
A guerra,
that an end is put to this war.
me refiro à guerra da Ucrânia.
I'm not only talking about the war in Ukraine.
Guerra muito mais antiga.
I'm talking about a war that is much older.
Essa guerra que dura mais de 500 anos.
I'm talking about a war that has been lasting for 500 years now. A war against the indigenous
É a
communities.
vontade, não acreditar que vai chegar dia
So it is a wish that I simply refuse to believe that the day will come when
sem ter a certeza que vamos
we
ver.
don't have to leave our children at home without knowing whether we're ever going to see them again if we leave them at home alone. And
Tenha que lutar arduamente pela sua
we want to make
existência.
sure that future generations shouldn't have such a hard struggle just to survive and to exist. It's not only about justice. It's about this fight for survival.
Não dá para essa luta ser diferente a essa inspiração. É isso que me move todos os dias.
And this is what moves me every day, this fight for survival, to know that my ancestors,
Lutaram bravamente.
they fought bravely, without any fear,
Para garantir os direitos
relentlessly.
aos
They
povos.
fought relentlessly in order to conquer the rights that we have conquered for the indigenous peoples, to make sure that we have our own territory,
Lei, inclusive constitucionais,
to make sure that we have our own laws that are even written down in our constitution.
dar continuidade à luta.
And it's this continuity that we need to fight for, with the hope that this resistance will one day end, that this war will one day come to an end, and that we can live in peace, with dignity,
Sem medo.
autonomously, without having to be afraid that we might die,
Transformem.
to make sure that future generations can bring about change, that can have dreams again,
Sem medo do
without being afraid of genocide, without the fear of
É por muito mais. Mas o que eu posso
having to keep silent. So
É por
this
todos
is my
esses
summary
motivos que é
of
muito mais
my feelings.
do que
It
eu
is
mesmo.
for these reasons that are much bigger than myself that I'm continuing
Lena,
this
ohne
fight.
jetzt einen
Thank you, Jamal.
Es wäre ohne Frage jetzt vermessen, irgendwelche Vergleiche anzustellen.
Of course, it would go too far to draw any comparisons here, but do a lot of things that you heard here sound familiar? I saw you nodding a lot out there in the audience. Well, I would like to thank you and pay my tribute and express my deepest respect. Anything else would be completely inappropriate at this stage.
Und weiter sind die
And
lokalen
furthermore,
Kämpfe, die wir in unserer Hand
these
Macht
local struggles that are within our agency, that what we can move here, that strengthen this global connection, this interrelatedness, that lead to a fact where people need to fear for their existence. We are in a privileged situation, and we can make sure that things improve at the global level. So, of course, I see that there's a responsibility for every single person here in the room, for everything that's been said, and often, well, I'm very rarely at a loss for words, but I found it hard to say something here because we all read Brecht, and we heard that when, well, it is our obligation to resist when laws are not respected. We need to stand up together, show solidarity, and sometimes we need to sit down together, maybe to block some excavators, to stand up for justice, to maybe broaden the limits of our laws. We cannot bow to profits anymore when we listen to all these stories. It is clear that we need a change now, and we need to do this together, hand in hand. And this is our obligation. I would like to challenge you today, and I would like to get your commitment not to go out there and continue your lives like in the past. I don't want us to drink in the back of the room and toast ourselves with champagne and say how good everything is. No, our task here is to ensure day after day that we stand up for change, no matter how difficult it may be, no matter what position we are coming from. But most of us can do this. This is why all I can do is to say it is our obligation to resist.
ich glaube, egal was wir sagen oder was wir jetzt
I
fragen,
think no matter what we say or what questions we might ask, it is difficult to find the words to express this. But Juma, I have one more question. Your home is thousands of kilometers away from here. What can we do here in this country to support you?
Não é que é uma pergunta difícil.
Well, it's not that it's a difficult question. I'm asking you,
O que mais precisamos dizer?
what is there left to say? What is there left to do?
O que ainda não entenderam?
What is it that you don't understand yet? And I can confirm
Eu não faço isso, né? Não é de uma forma de ser mal educada ou de ignorante.
and I'm not doing this because I have bad manners or because I'm impolite. But I think this is a question we need to ask at the global level.
O que vocês devem fazer?
What is it that you need to do? What is it that we can do?
Mas
all
sendo
of
mais
us?
precisamente,
But to be more accurate,
seria importante que vocês soubessem
I think it would be important for you to know, and I don't know whether you do know in fact, what
que vocês
your banks
estão financiando.
are
Na-
financing in the Amazon region,
Como, por exemplo,
such as, for
a
example,
hidrelétrica de Belo Monte,
the hydroelectric power plant Belo Monte.
uma das maiores hidrelétricas do mundo.
This is one of the biggest hydroelectric power plants in the world.
No território de vários povos.
It's on the territory of various indigenous communities. This is where the hydroelectric power plant is being built, and it was financed by European countries, among others.
Agora, uma das maiores mineradoras a céu aberto que está prestes a ser construída.
We have
Que é
a
Belo Sun,
major demining
uma
company.
empresa canadense.
It's called Belosun. It's a Canadian company.
O que isso tem a ver com vocês?
What's it got to do with you, this mining company? Well, it's got everything to do with you.
Impactos por Belo Monte, por Belo Sun,
Because the impact of Belo Monte, Belo Sun, these don't only have an impact on the indigenous communities, there are impacts at the global level.
europeus, o parlamento,
I believe that the countries of Europe, the European Parliament,
e
yeah,
também todos cidadãos
leaders, and all the citizens too,
devem se perguntar
they ought to ask themselves the question,
que tipo de projetos estão financiando na Amazônia,
what kind of projects are being
se estão
financed in
contribuindo
the
com o
Amazon region?
genocídio dos povos indígenas,
Are they helping to commit genocide there?
mais eficazes, principalmente com o garimpo,
We need better laws, also in terms of gold mining,
que possam
gold
impedir
mining licenses being granted. There need to be laws that can prevent this from happening.
a destruição do nosso território.
We need to prevent this destruction of our territory, of our land.
A
This
todos
is
vocês,
a request that I would like to ask from all of you.
busquem saber de onde vem o produto que chega até a mesa de vocês.
Try to find out where the
Eles podem estar
products
carregando
originate
sangue de
that wind up on your tables. Because it could be
sonho de crianças
soiled with the blood of innocent people, children's dreams that were
ele pode
disrupted.
ter o peso, a contribuição do
It
genocídio
could
dos povos indígenas.
carry the weight and the burden of participation in the genocide of Brazilian communities. And what are you going to do against this?
Busquem saber disso. Estamos à disposição.
I hope that you will find out what you need to do. We are ready to work with you.
Und
to
das
help
sagen
you.
wir an dieser Stelle auch dazu, ganz praktisch für all diejenigen, die jetzt, und das sind hoffentlich alle, die gleich dann
Thank you
in
very
den
much.
hinteren Teil des Saales
I
kommen.
guess the people will be coming to the back of the room to celebrate with us. We will be standing there with our donation boxes. Our volunteers will be supporting us. I'd like to thank Ms. Miedauer, who has also helped us collecting donations for the indigenous communities. And of course, we want to continue with that. But before we continue with the second, more informal part, I would like to get people's impression of what you take home after this evening. Let me start with the historian, Mr. Blom.
Ein aufgewühlter Historiker.
This is a very deeply moved and grateful historian, Juma. Thank you very much. This has been a privilege listening to you
Mich von dir berühren zu lassen.
and being touched by you.
Von dir berühren zu lassen.
We were touched by
Aber ich
you.
möchte dem noch einen kleinen Gedanken hinzufügen, weil ich
But I would like to add a little thought because I talked about this mythological nuclear bomb that we thought that we were the masters of the world. It is now
wir begreifen jetzt,
that we are beginning to understand that there were people who knew the whole time
wie die Natur zusammen funktioniert.
how nature works, how it's all interrelated. We had a gigantic ego trip over those 3,000 years, and we are now beginning to understand what indigenous or people of the antiquities called gods and demons. Today we call it biodiversity or ecosystems, but it is the same. It's a poetic language that may have changed, but we are returning to a knowledge that we had forgotten. And this is hopefully where our future lies.
Lena?
Lena?
Es ist nach diesem Abend nicht ganz leicht.
Well, after this evening, it is not easy to find the right words.
Ich glaube, uns allen ist bewusst, dass wir eine
I
Verantwortung
believe that we are all aware of our own responsibility. Sometimes we don't quite know how to fulfill this promise, but I think what I would wish for is for us to have courage, optimism, vehemence and endurance, and that we decide today, maybe 10 years ago we should have done this, but today is the second time where we have the chance to understand that we all have this responsibility. We cannot shirk this responsibility or simply brush it off. There's no way. I would like for everybody in this room to think about what you can contribute to change this world, because we need to change this world quickly, and I believe this is the thought that we need to leave with here. We need to shape the future, bearing in mind the past, and would like to express a big thank you.
Herr Weitz, Ihr
Mr. Weitz, what's your takeaway message after this evening?
Es geht mir so wie dem Kollegen Blum.
I feel like my colleague Blum. I'm deeply moved and touched by your speech.
Es zeigt wieder mal,
and this shows yet again that it is together as a team, standing shoulder to shoulder. We need to deal with people with respect and at eye level, and we can and will change things. This gives me courage. This day gives me yet more courage to go ahead, forge ahead with this crazy program, to go out there and to give our full commitment, give it our all. The commitment that you have shown, your own engagement, this engagement that many of us will contribute. I'm leaving here with more strength, with more optimism, like Lena said, and with the knowledge that there is no alternative and we can do it.
Juma, wir haben so viel von
Juma,
Ihnen gelernt heute.
we've learned so much from you today.
Sie von diesem Abend mit?
What do you take away from this evening?
Eu também aprendi muito com vocês.
I've also learned a lot from you.
Queria poder ouvir mais.
And I would like to be able to hear more, listen more, and not only speak.
Mas saio daqui muito mais fortalecida do que cheguei.
But I'm leaving here with a lot more strength than I had when I came
Pelo
here,
acolhimento, pelo amor, pelo carinho,
because of
pela
the
segurança.
welcome you gave me, the love, the feeling of belonging and security that you have shown me.
Se me perguntasse se eu queria estar aqui,
If you were to ask me whether I'd like to be here,
não gostaria.
Well,
Não por vocês.
I would have said no. I wouldn't want to be here, not because of you.
Eu queria estar lá no meu território.
I would like to be on my own land, in my own village,
Familiares.
with
Poder
my
ter meus
family,
filhos ali. Poder estar
with my
vivendo a
kids
nossa vida.
around me. I would like to live my life.
Foi a viagem mais difícil da minha vida que eu fiz.
This has been the most difficult journey of my life.
E não
I
olhar
had
para
to
trás.
swallow my tears and never look back.
E vim com uma segurança, com uma certeza que eu não sabia de onde.
And I came here with a certainty that I don't know where I found it. But now I know.
Na verdade, já sabia.
Actually, I've always known it.
Que só sinto isso e só estou aqui
I can feel it here
porque
in
não
this
é
room.
somente por nós.
I'm not only here because
Não é só
of
pelo meu povo.
ourselves, not because of
pelo
my
território
people,
Shipaia.
or because of the Shipaya territory.
Conseguem chegar até aqui.
I'm here on behalf of all of those who couldn't make it all the way to this room, who couldn't come here and look into your eyes and experience moments such as this one.
Então eu só agradeço imensamente.
I can only thank you.
E eu acredito que
Thank you from the
a
bottom of
parte
my
mais
heart.
fundamental de toda essa luta
And I believe that
é de saber que eu não estou sozinha.
the most fundamental part of the struggle is that I'm not in this fight alone.
Que os meus ancestrais estão
I'm not alone. My ancestors are with me.
indígenas estão comigo. E tantos outros protetores.
The ancestors of the indigenous people are with me, and
E além
many
de
other
mim,
people
existem tantas
protecting
outras
me.
mulheres tão corajosas quanto eu.
And apart from me, there are so many courageous women out there, just like myself.
Polícia.
These women are facing the police,
Madeireiros.
they are facing the gold diggers.
Também tem os guerreiros.
There are warriors.
Então é por todos.
It's because of that
E agora
that
vocês
I
só
continue the
reafirmam.
fight. And now you're just confirming what I've always known.
E eu digo uma coisa para vocês.
And I'll tell you something.
Nem todo mundo vai entender essa luta.
Not everybody will understand
Vão
the
se
struggle.
levantar.
Not
Nem todos
everybody's
vão
going
ter
to rise up.
esse sentido de responsabilidade.
Not everybody is going to feel this
Mas uma
sense
coisa
of
eu aprendi
responsibility. But
Da
there's
pior
one
forma
thing I
possível.
learned very early in the worst possible way.
Quem quer.
We need to
E eu vejo,
fight
entendo
with those who want to participate in this fight. And
que vocês
I
estão e
see,
querem
understand, and feel that you are here and that you want to bring about this change. You are fighting for this change. And I'm with you.
Então vamos lutar com quem quer. Vamos
And we will
construir com
be
quem quer.
standing shoulder to shoulder with those who want to participate. We are going to bring about the change and build up a new world with those who want to bring about this change. And we're going to also accept the newcomers who want to join us in the struggle, because this change is not for everybody. It starts with just a few, for the benefit of everybody.
Então eu saí muito grata, feliz.
So I'm very grateful, very happy, and a lot stronger now,
A energia de cada
because I feel the energy of every single one,
E também dou a minha.
and I'm giving back my own energy.
Então vamos continuar essa luta.
So we'll continue this fight. Thank you.
Juma, vielen, vielen
Juma,
Dank, dass
thank you
wir
so
auch
much
Teil dieser
for
schwierigsten Reise in Ihrem
letting
Leben
us
sein
be
dürfen
part
und hoffentlich
in
einen
this
Beitrag dazu
difficult
leisten können,
journey
dass es trotzdem
of your
eine
life,
wichtige
making a
und
contribution,
schöne
a
Reise
small one,
geworden ist und
and
auch
thank
noch
you
wird
for that great journey.
Vielen, vielen Dank.
Thank
Sie
you
haben
so
auch schon
much.
angesprochen, dass wir es
You've also addressed
nur
already
gemeinsam
that
und kollektiv
we have to
schaffen
join
können.
in
Das gilt
our
für viele
efforts
Dinge, auch für so
to
etwas wie
always
die Erdgespräche. Und wir
do it
möchten
in
am Ende,
concert, and the
dass
same
Sie
holds true for the
auch das
Earth Talks.
Rückgrat dieser
And we want to
Veranstaltung
make sure that
kennenlernen. Deswegen
you
möchte ich
are
die
getting to know the
unzähligen
backbone
Volunteers
of
jetzt gleich
our
zu uns zum
event, and therefore I'd like to call the
Schlussfoto
numerous
auf die Bühne
volunteers to come up on stage for one final photo. Please storm the stage, and I would kindly ask every one of you to join in as well for one group picture.
Wir danken heute diesen vielen, vielen
We
Menschen,
would like to thank all of these people being the backbone of our Earth Talks. But we would also like to extend our thanks to all partners of the Earth Talks, all helpers, everyone in Hall E, and Concept Solutions technicians. Thanks to the strategic partner, the Four Paws, the Vier Pfoten. Thanks to the great team of volunteers. Big thanks.
Ich bin André, ich darf einmal Danke sagen.
Hello, my name is André. I would also like to say a big thank you to each and everyone in the audience. Thank you to Florian also for moderating the event for us in such a charming way.
Und wenn ich vielleicht der Einzige sein darf,
And
der sich
since I may be the only one courageous enough to ask for your donations, we've set up boxes for you.
von Juma aufgedruckt
You will
sehen.
see
Wir sammeln
Juma's picture on the boxes. We are going to collect money that are going to go to her institute 100%. And as for every donation, as of 50 euros, we will get this T-shirt here.
Seien Sie nicht sparsam, sondern während Sie sich vorbereiten und herunterkommen.
Do give the money, and when coming down to the organic buffet, amazing partners, please put some money into your hands to donate them and to please get this T-shirt for donations as of 50 euros. Thank you so much for doing so.
Und ein paar Worte.
Just a few more words. Now we are going to enjoy the second part of today's event. There are people waiting for these words. The stage is yours.